Ethereum has this new update, right, in terms of the monetary policy and the burning mechanism, et cetera.
So I got completely savage day one on Twitter when I talked about EIP 1559 actually increasing fee levels. Apparently that was something that had been forecasted, so people didn't like that I pointed that out. But
Was it right?
Yeah. So like fees on Ethereum are like, I would say, structurally higher now. And really what EIP 1559 did was cut out the floor in terms of fees. So when you'd have periods on Ethereum of downtime where it would get pretty cheap to transact, the new EIP kind of just eliminated that and set like a higher threshold, minimum threshold to sort of transact. I'm vastly oversimplifying, but generally my read is that it's sort of consistently like pretty pricey to transact. Of course, you got the Ethereum community got this great thing in return, which is burning a significant share of all the fees that would be paid to miners. Miners are making as much revenue now as they were before, and also I think a majority of those fees are being burned. So think about what that means from a user perspective. So that's good and bad. On the one hand, you can make this argument, hey, if we actually reduce the issuance, Ethereum can become deflationary from a monetary perspective. It's a great story to tell investors. It's a form of rent extraction, right? So initially the miners, all of the fees were going to pay miners for their service of keeping the block space linear and, doing the thing that miners do. A good portion of the fees associated with using Ethereum just go to effectively juicing the price of Ethereum, right? By, potentially reducing the supply. And so that really benefits token holders at the expense of users of the blockchain. Now, a lot of Ethereums will say to me like, oh, well, token holders are users, so it's all the same thing. But if you expect Ethereum to mature and you have a lot of firms that hold Ethereum just for working capital perspective, just to utilize the blockchain, transact on it without wanting to have financial exposure to Ether, those firms are going to feel disempowered because, the Ethereum governance process increased the costs of using Ethereum and funneled that sort of return into the token price. And so now what you have, thanks to the CIP, is like these two groups, these stakeholder groups are at odds with each other. People that are long-term, effectively speculators, not to use that pejoratively, on the token price. And then people, and I think this is the most important demographic that you want to sort of curry favor with, you want to sort of coddle them, is the people that use and hold Ethereum as working capital. But that latter group is a little disempowered by the change, in my view. So that's, I'm certainly not known to be like, deeply part of the Ethereum community. So this wasn't received very well.
People on Twitter, et cetera, like they love that idea, right? So they're going to applaud you for that thought process. But you're basically saying, yes, but the people who are using this may actually be a negative impact. And so is it fair to say that your analysis is this could be short-term good because price goes up, but actually long-term sustainability over a 10-year period or something could put more stress or kind of be bigger obstacles or more complexity moving forward because of the change?
People begin to understand that these somewhat opaque governance processes, they're not necessarily weighing the interests of all stakeholders equally. And there could well be a moment where people realize, wow, we turned up the rent extraction dial too high and we got to turn it back now. I think that's completely plausible. I don't think people are really ready to hear that message. Maybe fees need to be really high for a long time and these other smart contract competitors start to do really, really well, which we've seen. That's happened in the last week or so. Just, appreciating relative to Ethereum. But yeah, I think there could be a reckoning over the unanticipated impacts of tweaking things that look like technical things, but they're actually political changes.
So my view of this has been, and I want to see if you one, agree or disagree, and then two, also like how you think this will play out moving forward, is there was Bitcoin. People tried to do things with it. They were unhappy with the technical kind of architecture and how easy it would be. They went and they built Ethereum. For all intents and purposes, they were able to accomplish the composability that they were looking for that led to DeFi and many of these other things. But then they started to hit kind of a limiting wall. And so flow, is one example. But you've also had the Binance Smart Chains of the world. You've got things like Solana, et cetera, that are now starting to pop up. And it almost feels like to some degree, there's a lot more technical competition among the smart contract platforms than, let's say, Bitcoin and something else that's competing from a monetary standpoint. And so if that is true, and you can agree or disagree with it, is this something where the old, like, what is MySpace, what is Facebook, what is the next social network, whatever, that is more likely to play out along the smart contract technical competition like landscape, not claiming any one of them is any one of those companies, equivalent, but just saying like there is going to be ones that find success. There's going to be ones that disrupt. There's always going to be new challengers. And like, you're going to constantly have to iterate and innovate your way to stay at the front of the pack, to hold both one, the economic holders, but also two, the users of the platform. Because it seems like Bitcoin it either works or it doesn't, but no one's really competing for that like decentralized, programmatic, monetary policy, et cetera. And so it's kind of a 1 or 0. Here, it doesn't feel that way when you talk about the smart contract platforms.
If you think about the key decisions that are made, whether it's changes to Bitcoin, I mean, the block size change, as I said with EIP 1559, these look like technical changes, but really they pertain to governance, and they pertain to, who are the winners and losers in the system? Who are the entities that can extract rent from being proximate to the protocol, and who are the entities that are being effectively harvested by the protocol elites? Not to, kind of engage in fear mongering or anything, but that is at the core of any real major change that happens in any blockchain is who are we empowering by virtue of our changes to the protocol, and who are we disempowering? And oftentimes developers don't acknowledge that they're engaged in politics. They think they're engaged in engineering, but it's politics because there's billions of dollars on the line. In a non-formalized system, which is the governance of most blockchains, it's not formalized. Power still exists. It's just veiled. It's opaque. So it's not clear who has power. And then in a highly technocratic system, it's a lot of engineers that take up this role as policymakers, people that can actually influence the governance of the system. I would say that's what I mostly perceive is these like backdoor, pretty opaque, like pretty hard to understand as a regular person, settings where decisions are made. And, it's largely technocrats, like, effectively very technical engineers that are making political decisions. Of course, you do occasionally have, influence, and it's getting more blurred now as you have more interest groups and you have, more large corporates that try and inject themselves into, these governance conversations, like, the New York Agreement, things like that. And you also have more sponsorship of core devs, which muddies the waters. But I would say, historically, it's largely technocratic and also hard for an outsider to sort of get a handle on.